we're taught basically to be incongruent. It's unfortunate, but that's the way we've been raised. Fake it till you make it. If you've got a boss you don't like, pretend you do. And the challenge there is incongruence creates distrust. So a lot of our relationships unknowingly are built on this foundation of distrust because we're incongruent.
Well, why don't we start off?
Morning.
Hey,
Randy.
About your history. You grew up you started in horses really young, and have spent your life with horses, and I've learned a lot with horses, and then we'll go into some of the lessons you've learned from horses.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I started in 1990 in this world of experiential education. I came out of a personal growth seminar, was very experiential in nature, and I said, now I know what I'm supposed to do with my life. And it was really an important moment in my life because I started working with people at that point in a very experiential way. So experiential meaning engaging them in the learning at a very different level. So instead of taking things in intellectually, which is the more of the common format today, the learning occurs at an embodied level. So more head, heart, gut. So we're doing a little adjusting here. We good?
Yep.
Okay. So the learning occurring at more of an embodied level, it makes it allows it to be transferred at a higher level. So it's retained and transferred. So it really spoke to me, this experiential format. I also have spent 50 years of my life working with horses and found that when I was around them, that there was a calm, I was able to be more present, and they just really opened up some doors for me to want to pursue this idea of working with horses and people. So in 2009, I brought the horses and the experiential learning together and was able to start that division of my business, which is what we're going to talk about today. So horses as teachers. Many people have backgrounds with horses. People understand that they're used for therapeutic reasons. The purpose with my work with the horse is to actually allow them to be the teacher. There's some modalities out there where it's more horse's tool versus horse's teacher. So horse's teacher would mean that we allow the horse a role as a facilitator. So in a few moments, you're going to see me go in and do something with the horse where I'm communicating a goal, and we're going to co-create that goal together. And in that co-creation, I'm going to get feedback about my nonverbal communication. So let me back up for just a minute. So some of the things that make horses great teachers, one is, if you think about them, we want to think about them and reference them in their herd dynamic. So their herd dynamic out in the wild, living their lives. One of the things that's really important is that that helps them be such great teachers is that they are preyed upon. They're eaten by other animals. So one of their key roles in their herd is to support survival. So one of the things that they bring to us that's so relevant for their survival is, interestingly enough, if you imagine the lion that's approaching the herd looking for its next meal, the lion is what we call incongruent. So incongruent meaning on the inside he's hungry, but on the outside he's wearing a mask. He's stealthy, he's stalking, he's trying to get close to the herd with the intent of his next meal. So in that process, what supports the horse's survival is they actually sense the energy of the incongruence. They alert the herd and they move to a position of safety. That same lion that's just eaten is what we call congruent. So he's not a threat. He's got a full tummy, he's a happy lion. He can actually, and this has been documented, he can walk through the herd and the horses do not respond or react because he's not a threat. So it's not the physicality of the lion or the predator, it's the energy. So if we jump over to people for just a moment, we're taught basically to be incongruent. It's unfortunate, but that's the way we've been raised. Fake it till you make it. If you've got a boss you don't like, pretend you do. And the challenge there is incongruence creates distrust. So a lot of our relationships unknowingly are built on this foundation of distrust because we're incongruent. So when you go in to do any work with the horses, the very first thing they're going to do, even though we've domesticated them and even though they're not in an environment, I'll just keep talking while we work out our little technical problems this morning. Are we good? We're back with a little sand on the. So yeah, this is our live first session, so it's all good. So when you work with the horses, the very first thing they're going to do is they're going to scan us energetically. Are we congruent? Are we incongruent? And they're going to give us feedback. And in that giving us feedback, we start to recognize what it feels like when we're incongruent, what it feels like when we're congruent, so we can duplicate it, which would be the goal. The way to get congruent is just to simply acknowledge the incongruent. So let's say you have a fear of horses, right? And the thing that we've been taught, people have been taught, is don't let them see the fear. Well, it's actually the opposite. So instead of walking up to the horse and going, nice horsey, on the outside, and on the inside you're terrified, what you would do is you would actually go up to the horse and say, you know what, you're big and I'm scared, and take a breath. And then the horse is like, okay, we're good, energy matches. So that in itself is one of the main focuses that we work with. And if we shift over for just a moment to leadership, and if you think about, you know, the leaders that you have known that have been effective and the leaders that maybe you have worked with that you would say have been ineffective, some of it is technique and communication and the way they approach things. A lot of it, 93% of it, is actually energy. And so if you're working with somebody that's incongruent, you're going to be on a heightened state of alert. You're going to be a little bit less trusting. And there's all these components of leadership that the congruence either allows us to be good or not effective. So we're going to come back to that. A couple other things that the horses bring that are really important is they're present. It's always 100% present. It's always right here, right now. They're not in yesterday. They're not in tomorrow. And so if you think about that, that's a very effective component of leadership. If you're talking to somebody and they're in the present moment, you have a very different dialogue with them. Horses are what we call consensual versus dominant in their leadership. So consensual meaning sensing together. It's always for the good of the herd, the good of the company, the good of the team, the good of the family, the good of the community. It's not dominant, which dogs are dominant. So there's always one dog that's the one that eats first, that takes down the rest of the dogs. If we look at it in terms of organizations, we would say the military is dominant, and Southwest Airlines might be considered consensual. And, you know, not good or bad, just different and distinct. Horses are proactive versus reactive. So they're going to assess, respond, reassess, and then go back to present state or back to grazing is what we say. So they bring a lot to the table. If our world looked a little bit more like the horses in a herd dynamic right now, we'd probably be having a whole lot less stress and a lot more productivity and peace. So that's just a little bit about what the horses bring as teachers. What I would like to do right now is give you a demonstration on that co-creation of the goal with the horse and see a little bit about how they give us feedback. So I'm going to go ahead and step into the round pen with the horse right now and go ahead and continue that. Okay. All right, great. So I'm going to co-create a goal with Athena today. And a couple of things that I need to know about working with the horse is it's not the horse's job to speak human. So we have a tendency in our world, you know, based on position or status or even personality, to set other people up to be the ones to understand us. And my saying is, it's not the horse's job to speak human. So one of the first things that I need to do is I need to recognize and speak horse. So basically what I'm going to be doing is that's very close. I'm going to come in here, and based on her language, I'm going to meet her where she's at. It's always the job of the communicator to speak the language of the recipient. So one of the things I want to remember is she's 100% nonverbal. I'm 93% nonverbal as a human. So all this communication is going to be nonverbal. So in a moment, I'm going to ask her to walk, to trot, to do a few things that horses do naturally, but we're going to do them together. And what I need to remember is the language she speaks. So a couple of things that'll be really useful is, one, I want to focus my energy in the place that's most effective in our communication. So again, start transferring some of this stuff to leadership. And if I want to be an effective leader, an effective communicator, I need to know where to focus my energy or my communication. So in this case with the horse, it's going to be focusing on the rear. So the rear of the horse is the engine and the front of the horse is the steering. So at a very basic level, good girl, Tina. This is good. This is not always how she is. So this is good. No, she's not today for sure. Okay. So, so I know that about her. I'm sharing that with you. The very first thing I need to do in any relationship is connect. So I'm just going to take a moment and connect with her, which we already are, given that she's standing over here with me. Horses don't need touch to connect. That's more of a human need, but we can touch and they don't mind that. They actually enjoy it. And so again, remembering that the engine's in the rear and the steering's in the front, I'm going to go ahead and move to the center of the round pen and ask her to perform with me, to co-create a goal. So we're going to do that right now. You still good there, Randy? You see everything? Okay. So you may have noticed that I have a communication tool in my hand. It's in horse language, it's a lunge whip, but the purpose of it today is to help direct my communication and encourage the horse. So you'll see how I use it in a moment. So if I want Athena to walk, I'm going to put my focus and my intent and my energy on her engine, and I'm going to create some communication with my nonverbal, with my body language, which is what I'm doing. So we're connected. I'm congruent, or she would be giving me different feedback, and I'm also clear in what I'm asking. So those three things are very important to the horse, and again, in our human relationship. So my movement is communicating to her to walk, and that's what she's doing. So I'm just going to match her energy right now. And as I match her energy, she's going to continue to give me feedback that we're on the same page. And again, keep thinking about this in terms of leadership, being on the same page. She wants to go over and visit with the camera again. So I'm going to redirect her a little bit with my energy and my tool. And you notice that I brought that in. And now I want her to move up to the next gate. So I'm going to go ahead and increase my energetic communication. So I'm moving my feet a little bit faster. I'll bring my tool out if I need it. And she's trotting. So this is the next gate up. And some people at this point might say, well, she's trained, like circus horse trained. I will tell you that if you come out here to do a workshop and we used Athena for 4 or 5 different people, you would see 4 or 5 totally different sessions. So it's very much that she's responding to me versus anything that she's trained to do. And I want her to come down to a walk now. So I'm just going to take a breath, lower my energy, and she responded immediately by coming down to a walk. So feedback so far would say I'm congruent, I'm connected, and I'm clear, or she'd be doing something different than what I'm asking. One of the things that's really interesting with the horses is they always do exactly what they think we're asking. So if she turns and runs the other direction, it's not bad horse. It's something in my communication that she heard turn and run the other way. And it's up to me as the communicator to adjust that communication. It's not the horse's job to speak human. It's not the employee's job to speak supervisor and so forth. So now I want Athena to turn and go the other direction. And we're still on the same page based on the feedback she's given me. So I'm going to shift my focus away from the engine. I'm going to move it to the steering. And off she goes in the other direction. So again, she's given me feedback that says I'm congruent, I'm clear, and we're connected. Otherwise, she'd be doing something different than what I'm asking. Good girl. And then back up to that trot. And then back down to that walk. Good girl. Good girl, Tina. So imagine you're in here with a coworker or your boss or your spouse, and you want to get some feedback about the dynamics of your relationship. You would engage with the horse as a partner in your team, and then the unit, you and the other person and the horse, would have to be on the same page in order for the purpose of the engagement to be realized. So, and that's something that we do. You could bring your whole team out and come out and spend time with the horse in some activity like this. And then you'd be getting feedback about the team dynamic and the team culture and the energy of the team. So there's a lot of different ways that the horses can contribute to all of our different successes. And now I want her to come to a stop. So that means everything about my energy has to come to a stop. So I'm going to have to stop moving my feet. I took a big breath. And you couldn't have done that better today, Athena. Look at you. What a good girl. Yes, I do love my horses. Good girl. Very good.
That is awesome. We're getting some questions in. I'm going to unmute
absolutely.
some folks and let them talk to you. Let's see. How about David? Are you there, David?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, question I've got as far as communication. What is it that really helps drive that communication, with something that's completely nonverbal? And I'm wondering, in your work, does this work help with, say, children with autism, and help parents communicate with them?
Absolutely. So I heard two questions there. Is it Dave or David?
Dave.
David. Okay, I heard two questions. So the first one about the communication. So, I think we have an awareness of this, but not necessarily an understanding sometimes that nonverbal communication is actually an energy that can be measured coming from our heart space. And there's actually equipment out there. There's an organization called HeartMath that really references a lot and have done a lot of work. So for somebody that doesn't understand that knows that we have a nonverbal, that knows that we communicate with body language, but doesn't understand that process, that's a good resource. And so that's happening. So by facing her with basically my body, it's a communication that she already understands that goes on with her and other animals and other horses. Your second question, as far as working with people or children with autism, it is a very, very useful format. There's organizations out there that do a lot of actually writing-based programs to support children or people with autism or with anything on the autism spectrum. And it's a nonverbal communication that people with autism already understand. So it's actually a language that they understand better. And so the horses actually help them communicate that with other humans. Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Andy, obviously, I absolutely love the training that you do. So my question was really about, what do you think the horse thinks about us on Zoom, the camera, etc., and how can, and more importantly, how can we apply that? Because as you said, horses are nonverbal, but how do we apply that information associated with us doing Zoom meetings versus in-person meetings with our people, relationships, and vendors and customers, and how do we apply that in this environment?
Well, I'm not 100% sure how to answer that, Drew, but I'll tell you what came to my head when you asked that question is, I personally think that there's going to be a pretty big negative impact to the amount that we have moved in the direction of away from the nonverbal, away from the in-person, away from the face-to-face communication. That's going to show up at some point, and I think it almost requires that we spend more time actively looking for ways to be in some sort of energetic communication, because we only get a certain amount of information from our intellect. More of our information comes from our heart and our gut. And so we've kind of taken that out of the picture, doing a lot of the virtual, the Zoom, the webinar things. So, I mean, that's I don't know if I answered the question you asked, but that's my viewpoint about, I think it's going to have a pendulum swing. It's serving us in the current times, but at some point it's going to take us away from connection at a level that we got to figure out how to get back to it.
Well, I'm still curious, how do you think the horse saw the camera? Because obviously it saw it there, but how do you think it responded to it, or is it still you?
That's interesting. She obviously did come up and check out all the equipment that's over here. She doesn't have an understanding whether it's a camera or what it is. She just knew that it was new and different. And so she just came over to check it out. So I'm not sure it's any more than that. I mean, that would be pretty typical for a horse to see something new and go, I wonder what that is. Let me see if it's safe. And that was probably the furthest she went.
Well, my last comment would be for those who don't know, and the training that Andi does, both on the personal level, where I went out personally and did the training, and then more importantly, bringing my corporate team out there to understand the nonverbal communication skill set. It was a great opportunity for you to sort of bring your team out to a different venue to go through some what I would consider non-transferable skill sets that you have to learn. But it was a great opportunity for my team in my previous company, and I would suggest if you ever are looking for something, this is a great venue for you to improve your team's communication skills.
Thanks for that, Drew. I really appreciate it. I look forward to seeing you again soon.
I do too.
Thank you.
Marilyn, if you want to unmute, Marilyn has a question about the horses.
Sure.
Well,
Hi.
first of all, I want to give you kudos for what you're doing.
Thank you.
My kids, and I will make the comment, I put this on my chat, but I was told a long time ago that horses make good kids. And I have to agree with that.
Okay.
Because when they learn how to clean a stall and they learn how to, feed a horse and do all those
Right.
things, really teaches them a lot of discipline. And
Yes.
my granddaughter started riding when she was 4. Okay.
Mm.
So, but my question, because I've been around them 50 years probably.
Yes.
Tell me, how old is she and how much training, how old are they when you start them? Because obviously I'm assuming you bring them in from out of the pasture. And how do you choose which horse? I know it's 3 questions. And how do you choose an animal? Which one? Because you don't bring them all in because they have different personalities.
Absolutely. Great questions. I heard a couple in what you said. So
Yeah.
first of all, she's a 9-year-old, half Arabian. She was born out in California. I brought her and 12 other horses out here when I moved to Kansas City 7 years ago. So that was quite an adventure. All horses have the capacity to do the work that we're doing. They don't all choose it. So it's not necessarily us choosing them. It's them choosing to be engaged with people that are typically not horse people and bring a level of horse-like behavior, good manners to this situation. So I have a herd of 8 horses here that we use as teachers. 4 of them are mares, 4 of them are geldings. I have a big draft horse. I have a thoroughbred. I have a 30-year-old quarter horse. Each of them brings something different to the table based on their own life experience. But they all have the desire to energetically offer feedback in the way that you saw Athena do today. Did I answer your question?
Very cool. Yeah.
Thank you.
And how old are they when you start training them?
Perfect. That really depends on them. I have 2 5-year-old half Arabians right now that are just starting to go into the teaching herd. They've just matured enough to be willing to behave themselves, if you will, in this setting. But I've also worked with 3-year-olds that are also well suited for it. So it depends on the horse more than the age.
Okay. Yeah, that makes total sense to me. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
You use the horse to create this awareness that all this tension inside you, the horse knows. You go to work, people at work know. You come home, your kids know. But once you've created that awareness, how do you coach people to harness that? I'm in a bad day. I want to stick my head through this wall. I'm uptight. How do we turn that into something more productive?
Perfect. It's actually it sounds like a very complicated question, but it's really an easy answer. So it's not about holding it or managing it or stuffing it. It's actually about releasing it. And the release just comes in the form of an acknowledgement. I've had a bad day. I'm really uptight right now. I want 5 minutes for myself before I go spend time with my kids, and take a breath. The acknowledgement creates the balance in the body or the congruence such that we can show up differently for people. Apparently Athena wants to be in the camera again. Oh, don't, she's chewing on it.
Athena is chewing on my computer. Yeah.
This is interesting to see her quite as curious as she is today. She's not always like this. Were there any other questions?
Steve, I see you got a comment. Do you want to talk some about the neuroscience? I know you're a big fan of studying that.
Yeah, thank you. I am somewhat of a student of neuroscience. And so, you know, our hearts beat, our lungs breathe for us without thinking. We know a lot or understand a lot about basic fight or flight response, which are responses to external stimuli. Neuroscience is all about understanding what stimulates your own behaviors and how you can use that to influence the behavior of those who look to you for leadership. What I find interesting about this, Randy, is we're seeing how she's able to influence the horse through her own behavior. And Drew's question about zooming really raises the question, how do we influence behavior of others when we don't have the interaction of person-to-person opportunity? And I think rather than, I think it's a very difficult challenge, but it's one we're going to have to learn how to adapt to. As leaders, we still have to lead. We still have to figure out a way to influence others when we don't have the human interaction. I don't have the magic solution, but I do have the challenge that we must learn how to do that.
I actually agree with everything you just said, and it didn't sound like you had a question, just a comment and a great observation. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your presentation. It's definitely a different, unique perspective I wouldn't have thought of. And I know we've talked a little bit about group trainings or bringing groups out there. I'm just curious if you can give some examples of how you've helped different teams or groups when they've come out to the ranch and kind of what types of things you've covered.
Well, you know, if you just look at what we just did with her and the opportunity for people to get feedback about the nonverbal communication, you know, kind of assuming that we're back in a world where we're in person again. So I think that's a big caveat right now. But prior to that, if the team came out here and let's say they just wanted to improve the connectedness, the cohesiveness, the trust in the team, typically they might have an experience just like you saw me have with a variety of different horses, with the horses starting to give them feedback about those three primary things I mentioned. Are they congruent? Are they connected? And are they clear in their intent? Typically going in with the horse for the first time doing something like this, they're not, right? People go in their thinking brain, which for the horse means we're not connected. If you're in your thinking brain, you're almost invisible to the horse because they're nonverbal. So coming in and getting a reality to my feedback, my communication in a way that I can't get through humans. Humans add perceptions, we add history, we add assessments, we add judgments to that communication. So the feedback's not as clean. So it's very hard for me to make adjustments in my communication if I don't actually know what I need to adjust. Good so far?
Yes, that's interesting to see that.
Okay.
Yes.
So here's an example of an actual team that was out here. So the leader of the team, it was an aerospace company, an engineer, so a group of engineers, so a highly intellectual group of people. There were 6 of them out here, and the woman that was the team leader, she came in to do exactly what you just saw me do. She walked in the round pen and the horse just started racing around, just took off running. So of course we coached her to breathe and to connect and to come back down to a place where she could get on the same page with the horse, which is tremendously valuable. But one of the things with her team watching her, when she came out of the round pen, we usually asked them to give feedback. So the feedback from the team was, that's how we feel when you walk in the room. She didn't know it. It wasn't effective. It created people going into a coping state instead of a focus state in the meetings, but she didn't know it. So her ability to discover that in this setting allowed her to learn how to adjust and get feedback and continue to work on that energy so she could step into a meeting and actually be effective instead of people feeling like they wanted to run out of the room.
Wow,
Is that useful?
Yeah,
Okay,
very
yeah.
interesting.
Yeah,
I wouldn't
so
have expected that. Interesting.
Andre, let's go to you.
Oh, I'll talk all day, so be careful when you ask me to speak on things. No,
Hi, Andre.
how you doing, Andy? I love what you do. Look, coming from where I come from, we weren't around horses, right? So I don't know anything about horses, but it speaks to what I got. I guess what I took away is that so much of what we do, and even on screen, so Steve talked about this, Drew talked about this, even on screen, we are to really sometimes more zooming. We are to think about how we appear on screen. It might mean you have to practice, but what's your energy level? How are you reaching towards the screen? How are you motioning in the screen, right? And you still have some connectivity that way. And so I know there are other people that know me, so I'm really high energy all the time. That's my thing. And that was just part of that. And so one of the other things that I try to do as a leader too is I'm always the same way no matter what's going on in my life. And all that means is I'm not faking. I'm just thankful to wake up in the morning. So doesn't mean I don't have challenges. I do have challenges. I just don't push those on other people. So I always want to be approachable. And that's a challenge with some leaders, right? Because we have bad days as leaders.
Yes.
And sometimes our face tells us we're having a bad day, although we may think that we're masking that. And so that was more of the statement. Here's really the question, because I love everything you just did.
Thank you.
I would think that this would be applicable to kids in school districts, urban school districts, where you have a lot of the alpha male kids, and a lot of times with those environments, you have heated discussions. And what those kids think you have to do is someone elevates their energy, then you elevate your energy. So how do you work with kids on conflict resolution?
So, I mean, I think you're already hitting on some key points, right? So again, a lot of times it's just a matter of really knowing how your energy is being received. So if I said to a 15-year-old couple of boys that were out here doing conflict resolution, that when you escalate your energy, it causes somebody else's to escalate, and that's the opposite of what will get you, where you want to go. I can say that, they can hear it, but they may not understand what that actually means. So if they get in the round pen with the horse and maybe they deliberately escalate their energy, or they think of the circumstance and the challenge that they're having and their energy escalates, and the horse responds by running, by moving faster, by stepping away, all the feedback that the horse gives, now they have an experience and they can go, oh yeah, that's what it looks like, that's what it feels like, that's what the other person is experiencing. And then in that moment, we're coaching them to breathe and bring their energy down and watch the horse respond, which is exactly what the other person is going to do in response.
Got it.
Did I answer your question?
You did, and that, to me, it would be awesome. I don't know how often you do that with kids, but I sit on several boards, and so one of the boards is Big Brothers Big Sisters, and there could be so many unique things because in that setting, those kids don't always have access to any mentor. Most of the environments are really negative. There's crime, high crimes, and so I would think there would be such a connection with kids being able to come in and understand that, because it's hard to describe that. You have to actually see it happen. And then for the engineering person that when their team was out there and they said, oh yeah, that's how they make me feel. What did they specifically point to that this lady was doing when she walked into the office? Did she just go in her office and not communicate to people? Or what did they kind of highlight about her that made them feel like the horse did?
Well, you will resonate with this. You may not like it, but it was kind of like how you just described yourself, where you're really high energy, and it resonates for you and you enjoy it. That was my take on what you just said. It doesn't resonate for everybody around you. Some people are super sensitive to that high energy, and their toleration for it isn't the same as how you perceive it.
100%.
So they were experiencing her high energy in a way that it wasn't effective for them. It was probably, she felt like it was motivating and it was great, and I love being that way. And yet in the team environment, it caused an overstimulation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I've witnessed that with my team, and so what I've done is I acknowledge that. So what I've done is I will walk into my office and I won't say a word, and I go, "Hey guys, how are you doing?" And they look at me and go, "What's wrong with you?" I go, "There's nothing wrong with me. I think last time I came and I scared you, so I don't want to scare you more, so I'm going to bring it down a little bit." But I notice it really, because that's what I am, right? And so I acknowledge that.
Well, and I love your awareness of it, and that you're doing something to have your awareness and then actually take action on it. Most of us stop at the awareness phase. Stop at, I like the high energy I experience without recognizing the impact it has on others. So, that's the whole piece of emotional
I told my wife a
intelligence.
long time ago, I'm not a fit for everybody, and I get that. So it's all good.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
So, been in law enforcement going on my 26th year now, and I've had to use my gut more than most. Yeah. And it really has served me well, not only just in police work, but in relationships, of course. We hear the term empathy all the time, and empathy in defined. I want to understand empathy at a deeper level, because I really think that it's overused, because I think people mistake it a lot of times with sympathy, but trying to understand really not only how somebody's actually feeling, but, and I know Steve talks about the neuroscience behind it, but that energy connectedness with other people to really try and understand their perspective, particularly in conflict. Because it's very hard, based on the way you were raised and your perception and how you view life, when you hear other people say, and you can't connect or relate with their perspective that's different in yours. How do you work through some of that to try and be a better empathizer? I know that's kind of an overarching question.
It was a pretty big question. Yeah, I'm trying to decipher what you're actually asking. I love the explanation and your understanding of it to this point. Can you give me a different something to address as a question that I could be useful?
So can you tell me, I guess, from the nonverbal piece, what's a good way to hone in some of those empathetic skills with people, non-verbally, and then maybe how to, and I know a lot of times when we repeat back what we hear and try and provide understanding, but how did you get to the point, I guess, I know I'm kind of rabbit trailing here, I just want to try and understand people and their thought processes better and their energy better, so I can really, really try and see their perspective through their eyes. Do you have some suggestions with that?
I do, and I don't know how far I'm going to go with it, but maybe I'll just share a little story and then I'll add a few pieces to it. And I'm sorry, I forgot your name.
Travis,
thank you. I recognized before I got very involved in this type of horse work. I've been around the horses for 50 years, but it was in the show world and breeding and training. So it was a little different than what I do with the horses today. And one of the things I had an awareness around about myself is that I'm very analytical. I'm super intellectual, very analytical. And that's my go-to, right? My intellect. But I also, when I work with people, I notice that my gifts are in my intuition. So I kind of disconnect from my brain. I go to my gut, like you referenced. And that's where I'm most effective in my working with people. And I went, you know what? I'm not sure I like this either or thing. I noticed I was either in my brain or in my gut and intuition. And so I knew that the horses could help me, what I would call open the channel. So instead of either or, my intellect contributes, my heart contributes, because that's a huge brain or huge energy center, and my intuition is involved. And I think the short and long answer, and then I could definitely love to have more conversation with you if you're open to it, is that when I am flowing head, heart, gut, when there's an opening to the channel, so all of those brains are contributing to the decision I'm making, to the input, to my connection with this other person and what's really going on, that's the highest level I can function. That's the best place to make a decision from. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it does. We had the doctor on a few weeks ago that talked about the upper part of the body and the lower part of the body, and really how the gut part and the brain part and the emotional part and the amygdala and then the frontal lobe, and how you can hone those in to make those work most effective for you. And I guess I'm on a journey to really get to that heightened sense of awareness in all aspects, both analytically and emotionally. So thank you very much. Yeah,
and what I would add to that, Travis, what the horse does to help us is because they don't function from an intellect. They function 100% in the energy level. So when we're around them, we actually synchronize. Our heart rate comes down, theirs goes up, and we connect with them, and that helps us open the channels. You can't open that channel intellectually because we're trying to get away from the intellect as primary.
Right.
So it can't come through information and understanding. It actually has to come through energy and experience.
Okay.
And that's how the horses help. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Andi, we've talked a lot about the person in the ring and setting the energy level, and the horse feeds off the energy level, positive or negative energy. Sometimes I'm the horse, so there's someone in, a boss or someone in your life that has all of that negative energy. How is you as the horse manage yourself and not let that negative energy control your pace?
Absolutely. Great question. So in developing some skills to start understanding how it feels in my body, energy, what it feels like if you're the person receiving that high energy person, is that what I'm hearing you say? So you're the horse, right? And you're that high energy team leader that's coming in. One of the things, the first thing is your awareness. So if we start talking about emotional intelligence, your awareness that that's going on. So taking ownership instead of going, that person made me feel this way. We tend to do that, right? We tend to go outward instead of inward. But to go, you know what? I'm noticing that this person makes me feel this way, but it's my feeling. Number one, that's self-awareness. Two is, what do I do with it? Which is the question you're asking. Well, the first thing, the self-awareness will help in general just get congruent. So that'll shift the energy. The second thing that I always recommend is to just take a breath. It seems to be the simplest and yet the least used tool that we have to kind of come back to a present state. And that's what the horses do all the time. Did I answer your question, Randy? Yeah, good. Thank you. I like the way you shifted it around there.
Yes, I'm just a horse. That's it.
Yeah, I wish.
Any other questions? This has been great, Andi.
Thank you.
It's awesome.
Oh, I'm having a blast. Thank you.
Randy, if I could add a couple things. There's a great book by Patrick Lencioni on 5 dysfunctions of a team.
Yep.
And this gets back to the neuroscience stuff. And in the language of business leadership, we talk about lead and lag measures. So we're trying to build trust between individuals. How do we build trust? And drawing from Patrick Lencioni's book on 5 dysfunctions of a team, to be trustworthy, you must be competent, reliable, honest, and vulnerable. I thought Travis asked a great question, and I can't imagine the heightened anxiety and stress that you're facing as a police officer with someone who's in a high state of anxiety. But you have to answer the question, how can I demonstrate competence? How can I demonstrate reliability? How can I demonstrate honesty? And how can I be vulnerable? I think most people around this Randy's table have heard about Brene Brown. She's a great lecturer on TED on being vulnerable. And if you can figure out a way to master those demonstrate those traits through your physical and verbal communication, you can influence other people to trust you. And that's the beginning of becoming a strong leader.
And then segue to the horses to help develop those pieces that aren't intellectual. So, Patrick Lencioni talks about vulnerability, not predictive. Vulnerability building trust, and it's not predictive trust, it's vulnerability-based trust, and that comes energetically. So I love what you just said.
Well, I see that Harry Campbell is pulled off, but anyone who's seen Harry make a presentation, he's all about the kind of energy that we've talked about. So he's mastered the art of pushing out his energy to a crowd of people. I think that's a very physical demonstration of the art of influence. The challenge we have with that Travis has or we have on a Zoom, how do we adapt that ability in a different environment?
Were you asking that question to me, or are you just making a comment?
Well, yeah, that is a question to you.
I'm sorry, I didn't get the question. I was listening to everything you said, and I wasn't sure you were directing it, so I'm sorry.
Oh, that's all right. I was rambling.
It sounded more like you were reflecting than asking, so I apologize.
Well, it was. You've read me well. No,
thank you.
You're very adept at influencing the horse through your physical movements. Harry Campbell has a great talent for doing that himself with humans. We just have a different environment, and we have to learn how to use these demonstrations of trust and vulnerability and integrity in a different environment. How do you do that?
I think you're already with the horse.
Yes.
Well, I think what you can't do on a Zoom call, you can still learn how to do in a different environment. So if your goal is to come out and develop those components of yourself, and it's not going to happen in a virtual setting, you come out and you do it with the horse. You get the feedback, you get the reality, you make the adjustments, and then you do your best to take it back to the environment and apply it at the level that it's applicable, which is probably minimal compared to a face-to-face, but it's still available. I think that you can still transfer something. I think that's our task, actually, is to figure out how do we transfer what's missing into a setting that doesn't really set up for it, which is the Zoom or virtual setting. Good? Thank you.
Well, thanks a lot, Andy. This was awesome. Thanks, Athena. Thanks, Emily, who I finally, after I dropped it, I got a camera assistant. So this is my first crew to help me.
Well,
so
we're honored to be here for sure.
It was great to see you. Great to see all of you. Have an awesome weekend, and hopefully see you next week.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Andy.
Thanks,
Thank
Andy.
you.
Bye.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you.